Morai v'Rabotai, we are continuing on Masechet Berachot, and we are starting Perek Shi'i, the last final Perek of Masechet Berachot, Perek HaRoeh, one of the most important prakim as far as the amount of information that is there, practical information of Berachot, of dreams, and much of the famous agatas of Masechet Berachot are all tucked away in Perek Shi'i, in Perek HaRoeh. So, b'siyata d'shmaya, let's start. HaRoeh makom shna'asu bo nisim liYisrael. Omer Baruch sha'asa nisim lavotenu b'makom hazeh. The first Mishnah of the Perek speaks about how much you have to love Hashem and how much you have to fear Hashem, basically, if you want to categorize it. Love of Hashem you show with brachot, when you praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Gemara actually in Masechet Baba Kama Daf Lamed asks, "Hi man de ba'ele meheveh chasida." If you want to be a true pious individual, be a chassid. Chassid doesn't mean peot and shtreimel. Chassid, that's 250 years old. The movement of Chassidut. Chassid means a pious individual that goes out of his way to show his love and care for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And one of the things that the Gemara there says is, you should learn halachot of brachot, because when you praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's a showcase, a display of love and care for the relationship that you have with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then, of course, the second part of the Mishnah, we will talk about the reverence that the person has from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a long Mishnah. If you encounter a place that miracles have happened for Am Yisrael, you make a bracha. Right? Rashi explains, Kegon, Hanach katani lekaman. The Gemara is going to explain, Mavrot hayam. If you pass by the exact area that the Yam Suf opened for the Jews to go through, you make a bracha. By Nachal Arnon, by Yarden, if you know exactly where the Jordan River opened when the Jews entered Eretz Yisrael, also you make a bracha. So, for now, just to note the fact that Rashi is explaining, these are communal nisim that happen for all of Klal Yisrael. So we have to still ask, if I have a private nest happening to me, do I make a bracha? That is what the Gemara is going to ask and answer. But from the Mishnah itself, we all we know is Nisim Yisrael, a public nest that happened for everybody. Makom shenekra mimenu akum. If you go to a place that was practicing idolatry and that was uprooted from that place, that is also kavod for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to make a bracha that Umer Baruch Sha'akar Akum Ma'artzenu. You make a bracha that Baruch Hashem is no longer Avodat Kochavim in this area. Now this is a machloket. On one hand, the Ra'ah, the Rabbi of Ritba, he writes that this is only Ma'artzenu. It's talking only about Eretz Yisrael because it's an extra Chil Hashem. When in Eretz Yisrael, that is the land that HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose, there is Avodah Zarah over there. Right? We actually learn in Navi, that the Goyim who were doing Chazaku Baruch Avodah Zarah in Eretz Yisrael, they were attacked by Arayot, different things happened to them. HaKadosh Baruch Hu rejected idolatry from his back house, basically, is his backyard. This Eretz Yisrael is the palace of the king. So therefore, the Ra'ah says this is only a bracha you make in Eretz Yisrael. The Rambam disagrees. Rambam says no. Ma'artzenu happens to be a bracha you make in Eretz Yisrael, but even if you had a different place, right? If you could take away, Buddhism from, I'm not sure if you go Hinduism from Hindu, that's wishful thinking maybe, but if you could take it away and no longer there is there, you make a bracha anywhere, because the revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name and monotheist belief is Kiddush Hashem, and the opposite of it is Chil Hashem. You make a bracha. You just don't say Ma'artzenu. You say Mina Makom Hazeh, from this place. And once we add that, Yerushalmi says the only time you say Ma'artzenu is when the entire Eretz Yisrael was doing Avodah Zarah, and then that was fixed. Imagine to yourself the time of Menashe, or the wicked kings who brought Avodah Zarah to all of Eretz Yisrael, and then sometimes some of the kings they were responsible and they took it out. Hiskiyahu HaMelech took out all of the Avodah Zarah from Eretz Yisrael. So then you make Martzenu. But if it's only partial, one city in Eretz Yisrael, also you say the bracha of Mina Makom Hazeh, from this place. Al hazikin ve'al hazvaot ve'al hare'amim ve'al haruchot ve'al habrakim omer baruch shekucho ugvurato ma'ale olam. You say this bracha, Baruch shekucho ugvurato ma'ale olam. Hashem's koach and mightiness is filled the world. So the Rishonim write this is because these items, which we're going to translate in just a moment, are things that you can see from the far, or you can see in most places in the world. So the whole world sees this manifestation of Hashem's kavod. That's the bracha you make. Shekocho gvorato ma'ale olam. So now, what are these things? So zikin are basically shooting stars. If you see a shooting star, that's the bracha that you make. Shekocho gvorato ma'ale olam. Zvaot is basically earthquakes. So the Tosafot actually says over here, the first Tosafot on the daf answers your question. It says all of these brachot. Take a look. Pirish Rabbeinu Shmaya. The kol hani brachot slichot lehazkarat Shem u'malchut. You have to say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Shekocho Gvorato Ma'ale Olam. You have to say with Shem u'malchut. There are other Rishonim who disagree with this, and they say, well, this is not a chiyuv. If you want to see it and you want to say bracha, you say it. If not, you don't have to say it. So therefore, there is the disagreement. But of course, the Shulchan Aruch paskins like this Tosafot over here, that it has to be with Shem Malchut, because any bracha that doesn't have Shem Malchut, as we mentioned before, ela bracha, it's not a bracha. So therefore, it should be mentioned with Shem Malchut. Says the Tosafot v'chein katav Rabbeinu Shimshon Mikosi. That's the Rash Mikosi. Ki hari aya ragil levarech al brakim baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam shekucho gvorato ma'ale olam. Exactly your question. That this Ra'amim that we are right now up to in the Gemara, the thunders, he would make a full bracha of baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam shekucho gvorato ma'ale olam v'chen piresh ri u'mayit Yerushalmi de Pirkin. Rab Ze'era, kol bracha she'en ba Shem Malchut ena bracha. So therefore, you have to say it right away. And then the Tosafot adds something very important. V'nir'eh l'Rabbeinu, the davka lero'eh mishloshim yom le'shloshim yom. That's only when there is newness in this episode that you are experiencing. If you see it once in 30 days, so it's fresh, it's new, then you make a bracha. Now, this becomes questionable as far as the thunders are concerned, but we do paskin like this for somebody that sees the sea, which we're going to have in the Mishnah, or someone that visits the Bet HaChaim, the cemetery, and so on. If you go there every day, you don't make a bracha. If you go once in 30 days, it's been 30 days that you haven't seen it, then you make a bracha. So remember this. The first Tosafot on the perek when we get to this in more detail. Says,
how would you report this? Like winds, like strong winds?
Yes. So we haven't gotten to winds yet, but says the Mishnah, the next item would be that. So al haruchot, the Ra'amim are thunders, but al haruchot, but brakim. Ruchot is not just a regular mundane wind. It is talking about like a hurricane-like wind, a very strong one, very unusual one. And you see the power of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how it could be destructive even. Omer Baruch shekucho gvorato ma'ale olam. And the brakim, of course, are the lightnings. Al heharim v'al ha'givaot, on mountains and hilltops. Ve'al ha'yamim, ve'al ha'ne'arot, on the seas and on the rivers. Ve'al ha'midbarot, and on deserts. Omer Baruch oseh maaseh bereshit. You say a different bracha. Now, the Ra'ah and the Amud Yomi says this is not just any mountain. These are mountains that are they look very different, very mighty. Not every mountain that you see you're going to make. This bracha is talking about very specific types of mountains. The same is with rivers. The Rishonim write that the rivers are the Tosafot, for instance. If you take a look at the last Tosafot in this Amud, it says ala ne'arot laval kol ne'arot. You don't make this bracha of Baruch Oseh Maaseh Bereshit on every river that you see, but on those 4 that are mentioned in the pasuk. In the beginning of Sefer Bereshit, there are 4 specific ne'arot, the chidekel and the frat. They are mentioned in the pasuk, and those are the ones that you may mention the bracha on. And the Avud Raham also says, in line with what we said from him before, it says on very unusual, unique neharot. And Maran Bet Yosef also in Siman Resh Kafchet paskins this, that on those specific mountains that are unusual and the rivers, you make a bracha. Now, something very interesting is the seas. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yehuda. This was the Tana Kama. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Haro'eh hayam hagadol Omer Baruch she'asa et hayam hagadol. We have had the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda all along that he requires specific brachot for specific things. For instance, Rabbi Yehuda was the one that said on vegetables you make boreh minei deshaim in the 6th parak, right? So here Rabbi Yehuda says also Yam HaGadol is so special that you don't just make Baruch Oseh Maaseh Bereshit, but you make a specific bracha of Baruch she'asa et hayam hagadol. Baruch Hashem that made Yam. What is Yam HaGadol? It is a machloket, right? So on one hand, many Rishonim write that this is talking about what we call Yam HaOkianus. Yam HaOkianus is the ocean. And the ocean is what? What's the largest ocean in the world? The Pacific Ocean is the largest and the deepest ocean by far in the world. So they say, we're talking about the Pacific Ocean, the Okianus, right? So that would actually make an afkamina for those who visit LA from other places, and you have the ocean, and they want to make a bracha. So you have to know if you make a bracha, and what type of bracha would you make? On the other hand, Maran Bet Yosef brings, by the way, the Rishonim who bring this, they say themselves, they say, wait a second. Even though that when the Pasuk talks about Yam HaGadol, what Yam is the Pasuk referring to? Ad Hayam HaGadol yegevu lechem. Hayam HaGadol is a reference directly in the Psukim, as you said, to the Mediterranean Sea, which is a part of which ocean? It's really surrounded by land from almost all around, but it is open to which ocean, meaning, technically speaking, is part of which ocean? The Atlantic, right? That's the part of the Atlantic Ocean, but Lemasa, that's what the Pasuk says. Even though that the Pasuk calls this Yam HaGadol, here we're talking about the big Okeanus, which is the Pacific, right? But Maran Bet Yosef, and that's how he paskins in Shulchan Aruch as well, he says this is a reference to the Mediterranean Sea. That opened, that through it you go to Eretz Yisrael. And why is it called Yam HaGadol? In other words, he asks the question that the Rishonim have. And Maran writes, because of the kavod of Eretz Yisrael, which is the center of the universe, center of the creation, the Yam that leads to Eretz Yisrael is called Yam HaGadol, as you see in the Pasuk. It calls it Yam HaGadol. Hence, you have this massive machloket of what do I say bracha on? And even though that Maran has a clarity on the psak on this, we generally speaking say Safek brachot la'akel afilu neged Maran. We say Safek brachot, when you have doubt in brachot, you don't say the bracha, even if Maran has said to say the bracha. So that becomes a very interesting topic. When I go to the Pacific Ocean, can I make Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam she'asa et hayam hagadol. Or if I go to Eretz Yisrael to visit, right, and I go by the ocean, and by the way, it depends. If there are people there, then you can't say bracha. If it's pritzut there, then you say Baruch Shelo Asani Goy. That's the bracha you make. But you can't make a bracha in front of erva, right? But if there's nobody there, you go outside and you say, do you say when you go to Eretz Yisrael by the sea, do you make a bracha or do you not make a bracha? That's the question. Says the Gemara.
And if you missed your chance to say the bracha, like let's say you've been like within 30 days, but you didn't say the bracha within those 30 days, you have to wait another 30 days to go.
That's correct. It resets basically. Every time that you see it, it resets. And that's what the Gemara says. Omer Baruch she'asa et hayam hagadol bizman shero'eu liprakim. That's only when there is that you're impressed by it because you haven't seen it for a while. What's liprakim? Again, the Tosafot already told us 30 days. We will be discussing that more. Says the Gemara, says the Mishnah, al hagshamim va'al besorot tovot, on rain and on good news. Omer Baruch hatov ha'metiv. You say Baruch hatov ha'metiv. Why is that? Because Hatov HaMetiv is another form of Shehyanu, but technically speaking, Shehyanu is when the good is only happening to me, and Hatov HaMetiv is when the good is happening to me and somebody else. So if you own a land together with your partner and you've been waiting for rain to come, because your crops have to grow, and then it rains when you expect it. Geschmack, Baruch Hatov HaMetiv. It's good for me, it's good for my partner. You buy a car, right? If you're only going to be driving it yourself, then you say Shehyanu. If you're going to let your wife also drive it, then
should probably drive it first.
Then you say Hatov HaMetiv, right?
Where does the fine and wine?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. I wanted to talk about the insurance, but
why do we say Hatov HaMetiv on a good wine? Where does that come?
So we're gonna get to that too. So says the Gemara, says the Mishnah, Ad besurot ra'ot omer Baruch Dayan ha'emet. On bad news, you make the bracha of Dayan ha'emet, Baruch Dayan ha'emet. Bana bayit chadash, if you built a new house, ve'kana kedim chadashim, or you buy new furniture, new items, Omer Baruch Shehyanu v'kiyemanu v'higyanu lazman hazeh. You say Shehyanu, right? Mevarech al hara'a me'en al hatova v'al hatova me'en al hara'a. There is a concept of saying a bracha on good, even though that it could have some negative side combined with it. And the reverse as well, you make a bracha on something negative, even though that it could have a follow-up which is positive. So even though that it could follow something else with it, you still make a bracha on that thing that happened. Says the Gemara, says the Mishnah, ve'hatzoek l'she'avar harezu tefilat shav. If you daven on something that already has happened, then that's a tfilat shav. It's a pointless tfilah. Why are you davening on something that already has happened? Says the Gemara, examples. If his wife is already pregnant, the Omer, and he's standing there davening, shedding tears, he says, I want this to be a boy. The part of the job of the rabbi is to go tap him on the shoulder and say, I sympathize with you, but lemaaseh is tefilat shav. And then you could tell him also, the Gemara says, if you have a girl is a siman bracha. But before that, it says, what are you doing davening that they should have a boy? If it's a boy, it's a boy. If it's a girl, it's not changing. Now lemaaseh, it could be a nes, right? There's a whole midrash about Rachel Imenu and Leah and Yosef and Dinah, but those are Maaseh Nisim. You don't daven for those types of Maaseh Nisim. It's got tefilat shav. You don't do it. To change a reality that's physically already set into motion, you don't daven. Says it.
Does this assume it's after the 40 days or does it matter?
That the Gemara is going to discuss and is going to say exactly that. Says the Mishnah, that's one example of tefilat shav. If he's coming to town and he hears shouting and yelling and crying, and he says, "Oh, I really hope that I daven that this should not be from my house." That's also tefillat shav, because if it is, it is. If it's not, it's not. In other words, the Mishnah is saying tefillah is the most powerful thing we have. We studied this before of tefillah. Kerum zulut libnei adam. Elu dvarim ha'odim berumo shel olam u'bnei adam mezalzelim bahem is the highest thing that we have, but also it has to be used in a practical and common, in a sensical way. If you have something that already has happened and you're davening for that to be reversed, then that's what type of tefillah is that? Tefillah is for something that you want to happen or you want not to happen. If it already has happened, there's no point of tefillah. Says the Gemara, says the Mishnah. Hanichnas tekrach, when you enter a city which the ruling people, the ruler is a difficult person, the system is a difficult system. Mitpalel shtayim, you daven 2 tefillot, achad b'knes, once when you enter the city, v'achad b'yitziato, and one when you go out. When you go in, you daven that you should go out in one piece, and when you go out in one piece, you thank Hashem for having survived this day. Says the Mishnah, Ben Azai Omer Arba. Ben Azai says you daven 4 tefillot, shtayim b'chnisato, v'shtayim b'yitziato, 2 when you enter and 2 tefillot when you go out. What is the 2? Noten hoda'ah al sha'avar. You thank Hashem for what has been. If you're coming on the way and you reach the city intact, you thank Hashem for your past, and you daven v'so'ek al ha'atid, and you daven for the future. And again, when you exit the town, you thank Hashem for having survived the stay there without problems, and you now daven again for your path ahead of you. Chayav adam levarech al hara'ah. The Mishnah says you have to daven, to say bracha al hara'ah, on negative news, keshem shemevarech ala tova, just like you say a bracha on good things. Shenemar, as it says, ve'ahavta et Hashem elokecha bechol levavecha uvchol nafshecha uvchol meodecha. Now, first of all, before we explain this Mishnah, it does not mean that you say the same bracha. Gemara is going to say, nowadays we say we thank Hashem and we recognize everything being from Hashem, both for negative things and for positive things. But on good things we say Atov Amativ. On bad, negative news we say Dayan Haimen. It's a different brachot because again it has to be aligned with our feelings. When somebody just lost a dear one, he doesn't recognize and see clearly all the good that is there. So you don't say Atov Amativ. But La'atid Lavo, when things become more clear in future, then you will actually say the same exact bracha, because you'll see that everything is for good. Says the Gemara. Now, how do you see that you have to say thanks to Hashem even on negative things? Because it says, Ve'ahavta et Hashem elokecha, at the beginning of Shema, we say every day, you should love Hashem bechol levavecha, with all of your hearts, bechol nafshecha, with your soul, bechol meodecha, with all of your, what we translate money. Meod means ribu, means a lot. We translate it as money. So says the Mishnah, explains every piece of it. Bechol levavcha, with all of your hearts, b'shnei yetzirecha, with both of your inclinations. In other words, the pasuk should have said grammatically correct would have been bechol libecha, with all of your heart. Why does it say levavcha, which is plural form? How many hearts do you have? Says the Mishnah, you have 2. B'shnei yetzirecha. You have the positive and you have the negative nature battling within you. And again, the reason it says heart, because that's the center of emotions. When you get excited about something, whether it's something good or something bad, right? That's the feelings that you have in the heart, so that you have two sides to you. You have a constant battle. Milchama panim v'achor, as the Mesillat Yesharim says, in everything that we do, we have positive side and we have a negative side. And both of them, says the Rambam, you have to use for serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Says the Mishnah, that's bechol levavecha, b'shnei yetzirecha, b'yetzer tov u'b'yetzer hara, u'b'chol nafshecha. What does it mean with all of your life, with all of your soul? Afilu hu notelet nafshecha. Even Hashem wants to take your life, you still have to love him with that. In other words, even though that we always say, l'chai bahem, that if you are put in situation of living versus transgressing a Torah law, you transgress and you live. But there are those elements of the fundamental, foundational belief related things that a person should be willing to keep those principles even at cost of his life. That we, generally speaking, we speak about the three cardinal sins. Tosafot in Masechet Sotah Daf Yud add to it as well, for being sensitive to other people, not publicly embarrassing someone. There, you have to be willing to die and not transgress, right? So that's bechol nafshecha, that there are certain elements that you have to be willing to give your life. And of course, this ties together with the end of our parak, with the story of the infamous story of Rabbi Akiva and his death under the Roman Empire, of bechol nafshecha, as he was saying Shema when they were combing his flesh, which we're going to have. So it says the Mishnah, bechol meodecha, with all of your money, bechol mamonecha, all your finances. Davar acher, and this is the source for what the Gemara is looking for, that even if negative things happen, you say bracha, davar acher bechol meodecha. What does it mean, the word meodecha? It comes from the language of midah. Bechol midah umidah shehu moded lecha. In every measurement that Hashem gives you, a good measurement, a seemingly bad measurement, everything that Hashem, every portion that Hashem gives you, heve modelo, thank him. Bechol meodecha is from modeh and midah. Bechol midah umidah shehu moded lecha, heve modelo. Every measure, everything that Hashem brings your way, thank him. Realize that it is for a greater good that you may or may not understand now or ever. But the realization that we have of being subordinate to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and him running the world knowingly and with a plan is the source of this bracha. Lo yakel adam et rosho keneged now. Until now, we spoke about thanking Hashem and brachot, which in the structure of the Mishnah, as we said, is the love that we have towards Hashem. But once we speak about love, it has to also always be b'tchilu urchimu urchimu utchilu. It has to be a balance between love and reverence. So the next piece of the Mishnah is about kavod of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not just love, but the yirah that we have from him, the positive reverence and awe and respect that we have for Hashem. Part of that is lo yakel adam et rosho keneged shara mizrach. A person should not be lightheaded directly in front of the place of Kodesh HaKodashim, which would be like in front of the eastern gate of the Beit HaMikdash, which straight looks into the place of the Mikdash and Kodesh HaKodashim. That's keneged shara mizrach, shu mechuvan keneged Bet Kodshei HaKodashim. That is directly in front of Bet Kodshei HaKodashim. Velo yikanes lahar habayit. You don't enter the Har HaBayit, the place, the greater area of the Beit HaMikdash. And again, a lot of the things of the Bet Knesset we learn from this. You should not come in a way that's not respectful. For instance, you don't come into the Har HaBayit b'makelo with your cane, with your staff that people would hold for kavod, right? And you don't come Ubemin alo, you don't come with shoes, as we just had in the psukim in the parasha, that when Moshe Rabbeinu is standing in the makom of Kodesh, and Har HaBayit, Hashem says, "Shal na'alecha ma'al raglecha." That's the source for that, which Gemara is going to discuss, of taking off your shoe in the makom kadosh. Again, many of the Sephardi countries, they had at least this minhag that they would not ever enter the shul with shoes. Now the question, yes, of course, the question is if the Muslims learned this from us or we learned it from them, which would really bring about whether or not this is Darkei Mori or not. But it seems like everyone learned it from the Psukim by Moshe Rabbeinu, Shalom Alecha, and the similar pasuk is mentioned by Yehoshua as well. It's just singular form there, Shalom Alecha Raglecha, and so on. So that's the source of not entering the Har HaBayit with shoes. You would never enter Har HaBayit with shoes. It doesn't talk about putting back the shoe on. That's because they did Avodah Zarah, which we're going to get to it. It says Ubemin alo ubepundato ubeabak shal raglav. Right, abak shal raglav. Again, when you're coming from far back in the day that you didn't have cars and people would actually be coming shalosh regalim on regel, they would come and everything was dusty and dirty. You at the end of the journey when you came to Beit HaMikdash, you were all dusty. So that's not respectful. So you wash your feet. Avraham Avinu did that not just because of respect to his guests, which is the simple understanding of the pasuk, that he brought water to wash their feet, and that's what they would do for when somebody came home from outside. You would wash their feet because they would be dirty. But Chazal tell us that he also did it because the Arabs, whatever the host culture was there, they would bow down to the dust, to the dirt of their feet. So therefore, he didn't want to enter Avodah Zarah. That's what you're referring to, which is not the simple understanding of the Pesukim by Abraham. But however you slice that, is very different than our thing. Our thing is just basic kavod, that even if you're not an Obed Avodah Zarah, even if you don't bow down to the dirt, you're dirty when you come there, and it's not kavod to enter Har HaBayit when you're all dusty and dirty. So you have to clean it up. Okay, great. Maybe yes, maybe no. But yes, simply put, that would be a Tanakh source custom, and many other Sephardi countries were very specific about that. They had beautiful, fancy rugs inside the shul, and everyone would take off the shoes beforehand and make sure to change their socks every day. So says the Mishnah, so you can't come with your shoes, and you can't come with pundato. And pundato is they had a special belt, so to speak, but the belt was not like this. It was a double-sided piece of garment which would be folded and create basically a place to put your money inside the fold. When you held it, that was your wallet and your pocket at the same time. Everything you needed to put somewhere, you just stick it inside the two parts of the fold, and that you cannot come and enter the Har HaBayit with that either. Says the Mishnah, Ube'avak shal raglav, in the dust that's on your feet, Velo ya'asenu kapandaria, and you cannot make the Har HaBayit a shortcut. Right? That means you can't cut through the Har HaBayit to get to the other side, whereas otherwise you would have to go around the whole Har HaBayit. If you have something to do on the other side, but nothing in between, you can't cut through a shortcut to make your way shorter, because that is disrespect to the Har HaBayit, to the Makom HaMikdash, and that happens to apply to the shuls as well. As we're going to Be'ezrat Hashem discuss some more details of it when we actually explain the Gemara. Or a kika mikal vachomer, and spitting in Har HaBayit, which is asur, you learn from kal vachomer. So either the Gemara is going to discuss, either you learn this kal vachomer from the shoes, that when I tell you that you can't even enter with the shoes, of course you can't spit in that place. And the Gemara has other sources for this suggested in the Gemara as well. Kol chotmei brachot shebemikdash. In the mikdash, when you ended the bracha, you would say, Hayu omrim ad haolam. Mishekilkelu astukim when the minim or tzdukim, they that did not believe in olam haba and in tchiyat hametim, when they started spreading their faulty faith and beliefs, then they changed the nusach of the bracha to say ve'amru. The tzdukim used to say en ha'olam ela echad. So you say ad ha'olam. Ha'olam, the world. There's only one world. There's no olam haba. Forget about olam haba. It's only here, right? And there's no the world to come. Then they changed it. Hitkinu shehu omrim. They made the takana that they should say min ha'olam v'at ha'olam, from this world until next world. Vehitkinu she'eh adam sho'elet shalom chavero b'shem. And they made the takana. Simply speaking, this would be the takana from Ezra Sofer and his betin, but there are discussions as to what other suggestions would be there, who the source of this takana was. But simply speaking, we understand this as Ezra Sofer and his betin. They made the takana she'eh adam sho'elet shalom chavero b'shem, that you should greet your friend with mentioning Hashem's name. As means of respecting your friend, you're mentioning Hashem, you're using Hashem's name to greet your friend. That is a tremendous respect, and we don't say that is a disrespect to Hashem, right? As we're going to learn the source from this, Shenemar, as it says, "Vehine Boaz ba'a mi Bet Lechem," when Boaz came in Sefer in Megillat Ruth, we discussed that when Boaz first is introduced to us, he comes and sees his workers. He tells them, Hashem imachem. He greets them with the name of Hashem, and they answer also, Yivarechecha Hashem. So therefore, you have a name of Hashem used in greeting people, even though that you would say, well, that's disrespect to Hashem. Why are you using Hashem's name? Lo tisah Hashem Hashem Elokecha lashav. The takana was, this is not lashav. You have to respect other people. Kavod habriyot is that important. That's correct. And when we have more time, now we're out of time, we'll discuss what actually triggered this takana. Why until then they didn't do it, and what caused them to do it then is something that we'll discuss. The malach tells Gidon also, Hashem imecha gibor hachayil. For his respect, the malach uses Hashem's name over there. Ve'omer al tavos ki zakna imecha, and the pasuk says, don't disgrace your mother when she is old. That means we follow our gedolim. We follow, when you see Boaz did it, when you see the gedolim did it, we follow their footsteps, and that becomes halacha for us. Ve'omer et la'asod la'Hashem heferu toratecha. It also says, et la'asod la'Hashem. There are times that for doing ratzon Hashem, heferu toratecha, you have to bend something else to for a greater good. We spoke about this, that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi used this for writing the Mishnayot to be mutar, even though that is asur to write Torah Sheba'al Peh. He wrote it because it would have been forgotten completely or partially. So therefore, he says et la'asod Hashem. There are times that for Hashem you have to bend, and here is one of those. Says the Mishnah, Rabbi Natan Omer, heferu toratecha mishum et la'asod Hashem. That he learns a little bit differently. Heferu toratecha mishum et la'asod Hashem. We'll discuss this last piece of the Mishnah again, Be'ezrat Hashem, tomorrow, and we will continue in the days to come.